Live from the mist-enshrouded mountaintop fortress that is X and Y Communications headquarters, you're listening to the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. And now, here's your host, Scott McKay.
All right, how's it going, gentlemen? This is your main man, Scott McKay, coming at you again with another episode of the Mountaintop Podcast. You know, a lot of times we as guys, we think, hey, sex is sex. You put the round peg in the round hole and, and you get off. That's basically where a lot of guys let it stand. I think this audience is probably a little bit more involved than that. I think there are probably a lot more evolved than that. And yes, that means you who are listening are probably a lot more evolved than that. Matter of fact, talking to you guys on the daily, you're definitely more evolved than that. But what does that even mean? What should we be thinking about sex? Not that we're being told what to do, but where are some ways we can broaden our sexual horizons in ways that maybe we haven't been challenged yet? Sure, well, there's connection and there's really exploring the feminine. But my guest today brings a whole new angle on this that I think you're sure to enjoy. His name is Dr. Kyle Hulsebus, and he is a health and human potential specialist, author, and third-generation chiropractor. Seems like guys who are doctors of chiropractic do these kind of side hustles because they kind of learn how the body works, and it just becomes fascinating. But I'll let him speak on that. And what he has is a site called 40over40.com. And, I'll link you to it at the end. It'll be mountaintoppodcast.com. Let's just make it 40 over 40. Why not? And Dr. Kyle Hulsebus is coming to us from Rockford, Illinois, which is a town I actually know very well. And he wants to talk about making love like your life depends on it, especially as you're a man who matures. Dr. Kyle Hulsebus, welcome, man.
Hey, thank you very much, Scott. That's a great introduction.
Yeah, did I nail it? Is that pretty much what you're up to?
Yeah, you got it. I do a lot of international speaking too, but that's just an extra thing.
Yeah, that comes with the package.
Exactly. We're doing it right now.
Yeah, usually if you're an international speaker, it's because of something more significant than just talking that you did to create the opportunity for you to get there and talk about it.
No doubt. A lot of men probably have. So beautiful.
Talk to us about 40 over 40 first, so we know exactly what you're up to. I think that's the best place to start.
Yeah, well, let's dive right in. So 40 over 40 is a little series. It's a video series that we created a few years ago. Kind of getting the site 100% together here, but it'll be launched. Everybody can go to it right now.
Little quad code action over the weekend, and you'll be
exactly. Yeah, little magic, smoke and mirrors behind the scenes, right? So 40 over 40, and what it is
another
40,
town that I know well.
Yeah, it's 40 ways to maximize health and longevity after 40 years of age. And my disclaimer is you don't have to be over 40 for this to benefit you. The reason that it's 40, the reason we came up with that was when I was talking it out with a few friends of mine. They said, I'm still a practicing chiropractor. So he said, what's the average age of patients that come into your practice, not just to get a fix, not just to get over a symptom, but really want to go in and change their health and well-being and like do some regular care and really get in and do it. When we looked at all the data, we said, it's really somewhere in their early 40s to early 50s. And the reason, and we looked and we go, why do you think that is? And I go, I think about when we get into our 40s, we're really prepared to hear it and we're actually going to listen to it. So most of the things that I've got in there are things that 18-year-old self would have been wise to probably pay attention to. But, I knew more when I was younger. I'm more fool, I'm stupider now as I'm older, so I need more advice. So that's.
I was going to say, I think a lot of it is we knew we should have done this, and now it's starting to feel like it's too late and, oh no, I better get on it. Like if I knew I was going to live this long, I would have taken better care of myself,
No doubt.
As the saying goes.
And I even just got asked that same question. I go, no, it's not too late. It's probably too late to go be like, an Olympic gymnast when you're in your 40s, if you're just starting out. But, we have certain physical limitations, but As I also pointed out, it's not too late to be like a medaling Olympian. I mean, look at the guy, the Turkish guy that was on the shooting team that, started in his 30s or whatever.
Yeah, inspired by his anger towards his ex-wife.
I mean,
importantly,
it very much something to thank her for, I guess. So
gotta love Turkey.
Yeah.
Or Turkey, I guess they prefer to call it nowadays.
Turkey.
Yeah.
I was just there.
I love Turkey.
Yeah, it was a beautiful place.
Kids and I have been to Cappadocia, and I've been to Istanbul several times now, and I find it's wonderful. The women are underrated in their beauty.
Oh, sure.
And the food is fantastic, and the people just couldn't be more warm and wonderful.
Yeah, that was my experience. That was our experience. So,
for sure.
Absolutely. It was lovely. So, but so the 40, so it's 40 tips, and it's a little outside the box, but it's inside the box. It starts off with some of your basic physical stuff is in there. But I use health. See, health is an old word, is an old Anglo-Saxon word. Among other things we didn't talk, Scott, is I study ancient languages. So, Old Norse, Latin, ancient Greek, Old English. And
I got put through Latin in school, taught by a nun who was actually really cool.
Oh, very neat.
She used to give us songs to learn. And I still know them to this day.
Perfect.
I can still conjugate verbs and stuff in Latin that many years later. But I digress. Yeah, I took Greek too in college.
Yeah, no, there's fascinating stuff.
It is.
So if you get an Anglo-Saxon to Old English that formed our language, health is actually an Old English word. It's relatively unchanged over 1,500 years. And it literally means a state of or a condition of wholeness, of whole being. And
how about that?
Yeah, well, and as an aside, wealth doesn't have anything to do with money. It's actually a state of well-being.
How about that?
Having a certain amount of money can give you some well-being, certainly. But so I encompass that it's not just your physical being, it's also your relationship health. We have spiritual health, we have financial health, work health. We have now mental health. I group some of the mental health, the psychological stuff in with physical. When I talk about mental health in this regard, it's more about your learning what sort of drives you to want to know more and the things you do to enhance yourself intellectually, and in our social leadership health. So, I encompass that, all the way through when I did these. So when I had, and then 40 gives me a nice variety. So I hit that whole spectrum, and Making Love came up on that spectrum.
It sounds like an ESPN show,
Almost.
Which gets guys' attention.
Yeah, there you go. That I didn't even consider it that way because I don't watch sports, but
too busy with this stuff.
Well, we do sports, but I just don't watch many.
I heard somebody say something one time that stuck with me for the rest of my life to this day. He said, I would rather be a participant at the lowest level of any sport than a spectator at the highest level. Like, right on, man. That's,
bit, yeah.
That's the deal. Yeah.
I mean, I spectate the Olympics, but as I said, I'm probably not going to be an Olympic champion anytime soon. But other than that, I'd rather be out in the field. I'll cheer my friends on. But so we do martial arts, we do Tai Chi, we do ballroom dance. And if you don't think ballroom dance is a sport, then please go try it. I
have a very close friend who is a national champion at it, and he trains for it.
That's awesome.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. No, as my friend said, he goes, if your wife can do that in 2-inch heels, then she's a hell of an athlete. I go, oh, yeah.
I'm not going to disagree. So talk to us about how the 40 for 40, that's 30 for 30, 40 over 40. I'm sure there's a 30 over 30 somewhere. Maybe. I also couldn't help but think to myself that wealthy health or healthy wealth would both be catchy names for some brand out there.
No doubt.
But before we digress too far, talk to us about making love like your life depends on it. Because one of your key components under longevity has a very distinctly sexual component, and that's this one. So go ahead and riff on that, man.
Yeah. So, like your life depends on it. I recently discovered this just on a show that I was speaking on the other day. I did not know the statistics, but I was talking on the same topic, and a lady said, did you know that statistically men in like stable, healthy relationships live longer?
Oh, yeah.
And I went, really? They said, yeah, like live longer than the women. And I went, really? That seems, with like sexual
Well, no, I haven't heard that angle.
That was kind of, she said,
die
like,
first.
Yeah, I was like, that's like they'll live longer. And I went, that's I'd never heard anything like that. I said, so,
why? Because they end up killing her.
Maybe.
It depends on the woman, You get with the right woman, you just have natural longevity. If you're with the wrong woman, you'll live longer than she does because you'll end up killing her. So it leaves no trace. Like you'll poison her coffee.
Or you go to jail and they take care of you in jail. Oh, that'd be good. It's my favorite place.
Jail, for goodness sakes. You want to be able to have the cops show up and you just go, what are you gonna do? I'm giving these guys ideas I shouldn't be giving them in public.
No,
there's probably a YouTube video for this somewhere that got banned, but obviously these guys know by now that I try to be funny. This is probably not humorous at all for lots of guys because they're living this nightmare even as we speak, and they've actually probably ruminated on this exact thought before. But hey, for the most part, that isn't this audience. These guys are hoping to get into a relationship with a good woman or strengthen the relationship they're in with a good woman now. So
exactly.
Yeah, talk to us about how sex plays into that. I know that a lot of doctors, people in the medical field, talk about how your sexual health is very much an indicator of your overall health. Is that kind of where you're going with this, or someplace else?
So, I've never really considered it that way, as just the way I look at it. I mean, some people that I don't think have very much of a lot of sex as they're getting older, and I see some incredibly healthy people as we would build them as health, as sort of responding to their environment and that. But they're well-rounded. That doesn't mean, because there's a lot of aspects that I've read enough on it where there's we can get into the spiritual, we can get into the almost metaphysical on the idea of it. That's why my tip is not go have sex; it's make love.
Well, I'm here for it. I'm all about you talking about the metaphysical and the spiritual side of this. Go for it.
So you can have. And I would argue when I've encountered and I've discussed with couples, and my wife and I have had this discussion, when they're having great relationships, it's not like every night that they're not going through the Kama Sutra every 6 months or something and trying all the different things.
Nobody got time for that.
And experimenting and everything. But that doesn't mean that they're not, and some people play around. Some people, they get flirty. They do, I know people that do role play, and I know people that do other little things because they have fun with it. It's a way that they connect and just sort of that whole refreshing. And one of my other tips is play games. I can kind of add into it. So there's many different things, but when I first built it and I thought about it, I go, I have some people in their 80s and 90s that have watched my 40 over 40. And when I was first thinking about that, I go, I can't just say, you're 92, you should be out there, having sex every day. It's, make love. But what is that? What can that really mean? What are the different levels in my wheel of health there that can mean? And one of the greatest is really, can you connect? Can you communicate with somebody deep? And this is a big thing I think that comes up more with men, but I know if I interview enough women, I'd find the same thing. Vulnerability. And sort of allowing yourself, when you're with a partner that you just sort of bare yourself. I think that's when we're young and you sort of have your first time. You kind of, there's a vulnerableness to it. And that's where people kind of freak out later, like, and if you break up with that first person. So I think as we go through time and we have different experiences, as we go through, your life doesn't depend so much on going out, having physical sexual relations. It's more, can you really get deep and connect and communicate because there's a sexuality to that with it. I've seen this in older people. A couple that I take care of that's in their 90s. And I know they're not physical with each other, but when those two hold hands in the room, you see them connect. And there's definitely, there's this idea of making love, of just sitting and holding and being sort of physically one being. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I don't know if it's going to make sense to every guy who could theoretically listen to this show.
Right.
I think we hear about guys who are in their 80s still dropping the hammer on their old lady and going,
There's no doubt.
yeah, dude. And you're talking about something that's meta level from there. So there's two things I want to dig deeper into regarding what you said, Kyle, because neither one of them have ever been discussed on this show.
Okay.
The first one is that the vulnerability you feel sexually during the very early stages of your sexual experience, for some people that's in their teens. For some guys, it's arguably a more profound vulnerability because, if they're virgins into their 20s or later, man, you feel even more kind of on the spot your first time you ever have a real sexual experience. But that vulnerability is, I'm going to be exposed as weak or incapable or not knowing what I'm doing, or I'm going to be rejected. And I've often said that we need two words in the English language for vulnerability. Because I think a lot of times the male mind in particular, we think of vulnerability as a box turtle trying to cross a major interstate. You're just going to get smashed. That's weak vulnerability. I'm vulnerable to being injured and hurt. Whereas the kind of vulnerability I'm sure you're speaking of is a different kind of vulnerability that actually is very indicative of strength. I'm willing to, as Brene Brown would put it, Brene Brown hits and misses, but still.
She can hit some good ones.
The Brene Brown version is vulnerability is a sign of strength because there's a courage involved there where you're willing to take the risk not knowing the outcome and do it anyway. And that kind of vulnerability makes you a champion with women in the bedroom, doesn't it?
Yeah. That's exactly where I'm at. Because the vulnerability, of course, as you know from your extensive Latin studies, is a Latin word. So and it does stem from the Latin verb wound, to wound. But in this case, and in the ability to be wounded is really what that is. You have opened yourself up to being wounded. And as you say courageously, it's I can accept that I can be wounded in order to move forward.
So it's basically when you're younger, the vulnerability is I'm horrified, I'm going to screw this up or get laughed at, but I'm so horny, I'm going to do it anyway. Because good grief, I got a girl who just showed me her boobies.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So when you're older, it's like I have evolved in my sexual skill and my sexual knowledge. I know my way around women a little better. And I realize that the risk reward ratio here is very much in my favor. If I'm willing to open up and share a little at the psycho spiritual level with a woman rather than just as we were talking before we hit record on this, getting laid is such a visceral way to put it, and it's so, indicative of not having a whole lot of depth on this stuff. And that's what this really is it's more depth. So yeah, absolutely. I love that you brought that up. I don't want to let the second thing that I picked up that you talked about go by the wayside because these guys are going to listen to this and go, McKay, you said two things. What's the other? That would be bad show hosting on my part. So indeed, the second one is a lot of guys, especially when we're younger and we've been listening to red-pilled stuff, we think if we're not getting any sex and we're still around and we're still being nice to a woman, we must be some kind of simp. Yeah, wait until you get to be 80, 90 years old and you still have this woman you've lived your entire life with, have a shared history, a shared legacy, children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, probably.
Yeah, at that point, absolutely.
These are the same guys who watched The Notebook, with James Garner and went, he's a simp, what an idiot, turn it off. Go, this is a chick flick. And then all of a sudden you're living it. And you're like, that's my sweetheart in there. Like James Garner said in The Notebook when his wife was quite literally in the final stages of just crippling dementia.
Right.
And, sex, am I getting some, am I getting laid suddenly becomes not even part of the equation anymore. It's the intimacy. It's that connection. It's that this is my best friend who I've shared my life with, who happens to be female, who I could share the masculine, feminine dance with, who is significant and matters to me. And, Kyle, where I want to go next with this is we've been doing a lot of talk on this show lately about how people are losing the ability to even understand why they should connect,
Yeah.
let alone connect. You have people estranging each other in close families for no apparent reason. And, I kind of sort of fear for our future when it comes to this depth that you're talking about. What say you?
I don't think I could put it any better than kind of the way you went. You encompass a whole bunch of my tips anyway on my 40 over 40 at that point.
Well, because it's truth, isn't it?
I mean, that's because when I say aging and longevity, I mean, life is too short. Really, you want to have this bullshit where you're not talking to your family members over what? Over what? Like some disagreement you had 10 years ago? I have a great story about that. It's not sexual, but it was a very interesting story I had. I had a gentleman at breakfast years ago, and everybody knew me. I was always the guy, I was Dr. Kyle at breakfast, and he just started to chat with me. I didn't even remember his name, but he was asking me because his son was going to the same college that I went to, the University of Iowa. And he's like, yeah, my son's there now, and I've got to do this and this. And I said, well, what degree is he getting? He goes, he's getting nursing, but he already wasted his life. And I go, how? He said, well, he already went and he got a journalism degree. And as soon as he got that degree, he just decided he was going to be a male nurse instead. Now he went to another school and that, and, he's taking money. And I said, well, when you talk to him, he said, I can't talk to him. I can't communicate with my son. He's doing this and he's just wasting his life and he's stupid. And he said, what do you think about that? I said, I think you can't have a better degree than journalism if you're going into healthcare, because you learn to ask questions. As you know, you've been doing this a while. You learn to ask questions. You learn to do that. I said, my most important job as a doctor is to go in and ask questions and help you get to the root cause of these things so we can solve problems. I go, he spent 4 years getting skilled at that. He's going to be probably one of the best nurses out there. And he just stared at me and he goes, I haven't talked to my son in 5 years because of this. And you mean to tell me that he got one of the best degrees he could? And I go, yeah. I said, do you ever even look at it that way? He goes, no. I said, you haven't talked to your son because
Based
of
on
this.
The story you told me, I strongly suspect there's a piece of this missing from the conversation.
Probably, but there are little things in there, but he just, and this was like a whole 15, 20-minute conversation we had back and forth. But, the gist of it is he's kind of like, I haven't spoken to my son because of this. I said, why don't you go call him? I go, I mean, you're how old? And you're not talking to your son over it's almost foolish. So yeah, this communication thing, it's more a matter of, why? And one of the biggest questions I think we can ask is why.
I think you bring up yet another very poignant point. This idea of people just not seeing connection as even relevant anymore has had a trickle up effect even to the highest levels of professional life. I am a divorce coach, among other things, and every single one of the guys I've worked with over the past 2 years has had an incurious lawyer who doesn't ask any questions. They just go through the motions and start filing things without even finding out what's really going on. And I can't imagine that. I think you're, first of all, right on the money. This young man who's got a journalism degree and went back to become a male nurse, man, he could become a nurse practitioner on his way through medical school, because the number one skill, other than sheer medical knowledge, for anyone who's going to be healing people, treating people, is to ask the right questions and be curious. Man, I had a doctor one time, a GP, who I kind of sort of inherited, because actually the other doctor in the practice was my guy and he was terrific, but he retired and I sort of got stuck with this other schlub. And I fired his ass because he would come into the examining room and never take his hand off the door. He always had his hand on the doorknob. Just he wanted to talk to me about what he needed to, and then he had to go. And I'm like, you know what? You're not my doctor anymore. You don't even care. You just want to get on to the next one and get the next billable session done. And, he was giving me bad advice and rolling his eyes when I asked another question and looking at his watch. And I don't know how you stay in business like that.
No.
It's just, okay, well, I've got medical knowledge and I'm God and you're a serf and I'm going to tell you how to take care of yourself. You're going to take these pills and come back. And part of this to me is how we got into the whole sick care culture to begin with. People stopped asking questions about how you really feel, what's really going on, what are the depth of your symptoms, what could be the psycho spiritual components of that. And people just said, well, you know what? It's modern society. We got a pill for that. And people are over medicated, undereducated, and doctors don't know a lick about their patients. They just keep prescribing pills. And so is there any wonder we as a society get into a relationship with an allegedly significant other and we don't connect with them? We don't even see the point. It's an annoyance. You mean I got to sit down and talk to this person and find out more about them? Hey, wait, I've known you 20 years and I never heard that story before, or I didn't know that about you. And the person goes, yeah, I don't really feel like talking about it. Can we just go get dinner or something? And that's a squandered opportunity to build intimacy.
I fully agree. I'm a big movie guy, so my undergrad degree is actually in theater, and and I've done film and many other things, and so I've got a lot of influence from like characters and stories and different things. One of my favorite films, actually my favorite Marlon Brando role, my favorite Johnny Depp role, is Don Juan DeMarco. If you ever saw that film, and Faye Dunaway's in there, and there's a scene in there where Marlon Brando sits down with his in character wife, Faye Dunaway, and then they've gone through all this stuff, and maybe this will spoil the movie for you, but we're going to talk about the scene. And he sits down and he takes his wife's hands, and he's like the psychologist for this crazy guy, Johnny Depp. And he's been influenced by him, and he sits down and he takes her hands, and as they're getting close to retirement, he looks her right in the eye and says, tell me about what you would love to be doing. And she goes, I thought you'd never ask. And that's what I'm talking about. That's a connection. It's just sitting down and going, I always just kind of assumed, we've known each other, we've lived together, we've coordinated this. But even if you're a single guy, even if you're a divorced guy, is to say, what do you look for? You don't just want, sometimes you do just want, a release for a night, and, that's fine. There's no judgment there. But even if you only had one night with somebody, wouldn't it be nice to walk away and said, that was really cool. That was a wonderful night. We had this conversation, we connected, we had the physical thing, and I've moved on with life and she's moved on with life. And yeah, it's not going to be, years and years, but at the same time you end up, sometimes you go out with the guys because you just want people you can talk to. And when you find a partner, a significant other that you can go off on these weird conversations, or you can feel that you're vulnerable enough to talk about even, honestly, a sexual fear. You brought up earlier, there's some guys that go a little bit longer. That vulnerability when you're not hormone driven as a teenager, where you come out and you go, listen, this is, to tell somebody, say, this is going to be my first time. That's opening up. But you may end up with a massively in-depth long-term relationship based on that, because you've told this partner of yours that, and that's a great word, his partner is, I'm looking for a partnership.
I'm reminded of years ago now when Wilt Chamberlain wrote his autobiography, and all people got out of it was the part where he slept with 10,000 women.
Right.
And he was asked about it, was Wilt Chamberlain. And he said, hey, I feel like I had a special relationship with every one of those women. And women in particular are all rolling their eyes out there going, oh, please. 20 years into my tenure, I'm kind of considering that's how he got to sleep with 10,000 women. Is he considered it like that? That's how it happened. It wasn't like, hey, I'm Wilt Chamberlain. I'm 7 feet tall. I probably got a huge schlonger. Let's go give you some. It probably wasn't that. It was probably women somehow felt drawn. Like, I'm out with you and you're famous and I'm a little starstruck, but you make me feel special. What are we waiting for? It's all about how women feel. And I think Wilt probably had this ability to make women feel seen, heard, and cared about. And that can happen very, very quickly.
Yeah.
In a relationship. but it can also go years without ever happening, which is tragic.
It's tragic, but people do it. People do it for society. People do it for their faith. Sometimes their religious community that they're in. People do it for any number of things. For their family, we can't let anybody outside. Family reputation and stuff that goes on. I mean, there's any number of reasons, and sometimes it's just plain nobody ever taught me how to say this, and I'm afraid to say it.
I'm laughing because I remember an Onion article again years ago. Where a couple was so religious that even after they got married, they still didn't have sex to please Jesus. And then as you read through the article, the humor was the husband was kind of not in agreement with this, but, he also was trying to get in his wife's pants, so he didn't want to make her angry or anything. So it turns out he was really a simp about this, and she was being steadfast, and she probably wasn't really all that attracted to him. So it was funny. The more you read, the funnier it got, right?
But you talk about that with Wilt Chamberlain, and what kind of came to mind is the same thing you said about the doctor you fired. There's if a doctor comes into a room with you and we're on the same principle, but he sits down with you and he, instead of holding his hand on the door, if this man had walked in and he'd sat down, he goes, "Scott, tell me what's going on. I've only got 5 minutes. I apologize. Let's cover it really quickly."
I'll respect my time and yours.
You would sit there and he said, "Don't worry about what's going on outside. You and I are here right now." And he just connects for 5 minutes. It feels like 5 hours you just were able to spend with this man. You're going, he's a great doctor.
There's a lesson for school teachers in there. There's a lesson for salespeople in there. There's a lesson for middle managers in there. That's human. That's the secret of the universe when it comes to human relationships.
Yeah. And if you want to practice, go get your own relationship. And because that's really what it is. It's relationship. We're talking specifically, obviously, ones that are going to connect and have a sexual component to it and go in. But it really at that same time, I mean, if you think about it from sort of a business sales angle, you can look and you go, "Hey, listen, you're trying to sell your partner, your life partner here, your wife on continuing this thing." So
yeah, it should go double for this situation.
No doubt. Like this is, I've been to anniversaries, wedding anniversaries of 65 years. And seeing these people and they're dancing together and they're laughing together.
I'm about to attend one.
Yeah. And you go watch them.
The end of September, which is about a month from now. My parents are about to have their 65th anniversary.
That's awesome.
And that's what it'll be like.
And then to get into that idea of maybe it's too late for me, if you're like this single guy or you're divorced and you're 40 or something, I got a great story. And I'm an Arthur Murray dancer. So I got told about the lady through my Arthur Murray owners, the franchisees. But there's a lady, I can't think of her name off the top of my head. She had owned multiple Arthur Murray franchises at one point, but she ended up, she's very financially astute. She saved money. She had like a 300-acre ranch. She was originally one of the Ziegfeld Folly ladies, so way back. And if you go watch a Man on the Moon, he's actually got one of those ladies in there that he uses in the film that was real with Andy Kaufman at the time. But this lady, she had a guy that kept chasing her. She'd never married. She never had children. She had a guy that kept chasing her. And for like 11 years, he chased her. And she was like, no. And then finally, when she was like 40 or 41 years old, she said, all right, come on in. Finally, he whatever, I don't know what happened, but finally he won. And she said, all right, let's partner up. So at the age of like 40 years old, she got married to this guy. And I think he was 42 at the time, if I recall the story correctly. He died, I think, when he was like 90 years old, and she went on to live to be just around 100. So they still had 50 years together. It's not too late.
No, absolutely not. And there's also a lesson in there for guys who've been taught by the red pilled movement that, yeah, if a woman just says no or isn't interested, the next step for you, buddy, is you're going to get arrested or fired for continuing to pursue her. It's all about how you make her feel. She could have all the reasons in the world for not wanting to get involved romantically right now with anybody, not just perhaps you in particular. But if you stand in that gap, I think the term they like to use is hold space for her.
Yes.
And are respectful, and you still are charming and masculine. It's almost like you wait that out. You're not pushing. You're not being creepy. You're not acting weird. What you're doing is you've made a decision. You've chosen her. And you're simply holding space and being patient, waiting for her to figure that out. Now, if she clearly doesn't want you,
Right.
if no is an emphatic no, if she's married, if she's chosen someone else, if this has gone on too long and you're really starting to waste your life, yeah, well, then maybe you're starting to be a simp. But there's a calm strength. These are the same guys who will talk about stoicism, There's a calm strength in waiting a period of time with a masculine, mature, wise patience for a woman to get her head sorted. You're a movie guy. If you've ever seen the movie Hidden Figures,
Not familiar.
Mahershala Ali's character waits for one of the really sharp women who's working for NASA to, clear her head of all the math and all the science and all the I got to get a man on the moon stuff that's consuming her life when she says, I don't have time for a relationship. He just is still around and he waits. He doesn't wait too long. He just can read the room. He has the skill of reading the room, knowing, yeah, you know what? She wants me. She just needs to figure it out. And that room reading skill goes along with understanding vulnerability and understanding connection, because if you don't have human depth, you're not going to be able to read the room. If you can't read people up front, you can't read the whole situation.
True.
Yeah. This has been a fascinating conversation. Kyle, I want to send guys to your website, which is 40over40.com. And when guys go to mountaintop.podcast.com/40over40, let's make it 8 characters. 40 OVER 40. And when they get there, obviously you've told us a little bit about what they're going to find. What else will they find?
So you go to 40over40.com. You're obviously able to get in there if you'd like to purchase the entire thing, and we give the audios complimentary when you get into it. You get access to all 40 videos on there. If you're not quite, if you want to just jump on and see what we got, I've got a little freebie you can download called 7 Signs that your life is starting to get too far off track. And you can jump on and get that. We'll give you some great information. We'll also have links so you can go to my YouTube page for some free videos that are on there where we discuss all sorts of different topics kind of on these principles.
It occurs to me that you're very much a polymath, which I like to consider myself as well. And so I'm sure, man, we could have you back and talk about something completely different, and it would take equally cool and fascinating twists and turns. I'm sure a lot of guys got a lot out of this conversation today. I did. I was challenged in ways I never have been before. Like I mentioned earlier, we've talked about some subtopics today that have never come up after 20 years. So I appreciate you, man. Thank you for coming on board the show today. It's been great.
I appreciate the opportunity to share about the 40 over 40 and just, sort of connection and what making love really means in health for everybody. So thank you. And thank everybody that's listening.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, guys. I appreciate every one of you guys listening. And that's why when you go to mountaintoppodcast.com, I have some free stuff for you too. Chief among those lately is a new downloadable report that I produced. I was giving away the same one for years, and I got a new one going that is really punchy and will give you something that you can use immediately very quickly. It's called Flip the Switch, 5 things you can do right now to get better with women. Not stuff you have to learn, not stuff you have to memorize. Just, just start doing this and your life will change and women will love you for it. You download that for free when you get on my newsletter at mountaintoppodcast.com. I also want to thank my sponsors. We talked about Jocko Willink's company Origin in Maine, the guys at Hero Soap, the guys at Keyport. Guys, we do a show about masculinity here. Better men get better women. That's what it says right on the podcast art. That's what it says on the end of my microphone. That's a true statement. You may not find a truer statement anywhere. When you deserve what you want, when you do the best with what you got, you're going to raise the bar when it comes to women. And that is the audience we have. That's who you guys are. You guys are great guys who want to raise the bar and get even better so you can raise the bar with the women in your life. I appreciate every one of you. That's what this show is about. And thank you for listening. And until I talk to you again real soon, this is Scott McKay from X&Y Communications in San Antonio, Texas. Be good out there.
The Mountaintop Podcast is produced by X&Y Communications. All rights reserved worldwide. Be sure to visit www.mountaintoppodcast.com for show notes. And while you're there, sign up for the free X&Y Communications newsletter for men. This is Ed Roy Odom speaking for the Mountaintop Podcast.